It is the Rolls Royce of breads. You heard it here first. That's it. That's what it is. Okay, my name is Nadia and welcome back to my YouTube channel where I make food and we see how it turns out. Today I'm going to be making what we call a Kornet Pogača, or I guess if you translate it, it's kind of like a cone bread. Trust me, it's way yummier and cooler than it sounds. As with almost everything that I've made on this channel, it's a staple in my house. It's something my mom's been making for years and we all absolutely love, especially when it's fresh out of the oven. I guess a better way to explain it is it's kind of like a croissant bread. There's a lot of butter, there's a lot of layers, and a whole lot of yum that goes on. As always, this is going to be my first time making it and I'm really excited because I just love this bread. I love all breads, but this bread especially. Hopefully gonna be pretty easy to make. I don't know, my mom walked me through the process a couple times, so we're gonna see how it goes. Anyway, on that note, let's get cooking. To get started on the bread, the first thing we have to do is activate the yeast. So you'll remember we just have to warm our milk up, add some sugar, add some yeast, and then set it aside to warm up and activate. While that's activating, we're gonna measure out 7 cups of flour, sifted, always, and a little bit more than a tablespoon of salt. When the yeast is activated, add it to the flour, followed by some oil and 2 lightly beaten eggs. I like to start this dough off with a wooden spoon and just make sure everything's combined. You're definitely gonna need to add more water, so as always, just take the cup where your yeast was activating and add some warm water in there, and then just add it to the mixture as needed. So once the dough has a more wet consistency, you can transfer it to a lightly floured counter and start kneading it out.
When you're working with the flour, don't open the window.
Sure.
A draft needs to be in a warm environment. You open the window, but not directly to the...
The dough is gonna catch Promaja. Oh no!
That's true.
What?
It needs to be in a warm place. You can't have a drafty room when you're making
We're gonna
bread.
catch the Promaja from the dough, I think, when we eat it. But we bake it, won't it kill the Promaja?
Nadia. Jesus.
From here, you're gonna split the dough into 8 equal parts, so you can use a knife or just rip it apart with your hands, whatever you want. You can see as I'm cutting it, the dough is still a little bit wet. It's sticking to the knife, my hands, and to the counter a little bit, but that's okay because I'm gonna knead it out a little bit more, so it's gonna be able to pick up any extra flour it needs, and it's gonna have a nice little circle shape. So at this point, you might be wondering why we didn't let our dough rise. Literally in every previous recipe where we've had to activate yeast, we always covered the dough with saran wrap and let it sit for about an hour for it to double in size. This recipe is a little bit different in that sense. So once I'm done rolling out the dough, I'm actually gonna lightly flour my counter, put the balls on the flour, and then cover it with a bowl, and it's gonna sit there for about 20 minutes. This is gonna let it rise just a little bit before we get to the next part. So after about 20 minutes or so, I'm gonna roll out the dough into kind of medium-sized circles. You'll notice that when you're rolling out the dough, you're gonna be rolling out some of the air, but that's okay. I'm gonna roll out the dough and I'm gonna try and keep them all around the same size. It's okay if one ends up being bigger than the other, just try not to make them too thin in one spot and then too thick in another. I'm gonna start by taking the first piece that I rolled out and kind of just give it a little bit of shape, and then take about a tablespoon of butter and just spread it everywhere. Then I'm gonna take the second piece that I rolled out and place it on top and kind of just press them together, making sure to go down the center and get all the way around. And then I'm gonna add some more butter, another layer, and just keep going with this process until I have this nice little stack of dough. My one tip of advice here is to not add too much butter, because obviously the more butter you add, the more slippery it's gonna be and the more complicated it's gonna be to keep everything kind of together. So when all the layers are stacked up, I'm gonna flour my rolling pin just a little bit and I'm gonna start rolling this thing out. My goal is to have either end of it touch the sides of my counter and keep a circular shape in the process. So really just go for it. Start from the middle, work your way out, and just have fun with it. I was flipping it back and forth, but there comes a point where that's just impossible, so don't worry too much about it. You don't have to flip it at all if you don't want to. For reference, this is the size of my hand next to the dough, so you can tell it's ginormous. So from here, either with a knife or a pizza cutter, I'm gonna basically cut the ends off. And then from here, you're gonna either split it into 3, but mine's absolutely ginormous, so I'm gonna split it into 4 even strips. I'm gonna put those strips to the side, and then I'm gonna cut my dough into 8 equal parts. From here, you're just gonna roll from the outside in. I actually flipped the triangles over because I wanted kind of the messy side of the dough to stay inside and then have a nice smooth finish on the outside. So obviously from here, you can see it kind of has this like nice little croissant shape. I'm gonna do this for all the pieces, and then I'm actually gonna cut them in half. And this is where you can really see the magic. All that butter in between those layers, this is just gonna bake beautifully and it's gonna taste so delicious. So I'm using a 12-inch round that I'm just gonna coat in butter at this point. You can use a brush or a paper towel, but just make sure to get all those nooks and crannies. And then I'm gonna start by placing my, I guess we'll call them little cones. I'm gonna place my cones in a circular motion within the pan, keeping the flat side of the cone on the outside of the pan. Once I have them all in there, I can see that they're not crammed together, but they're not super spaced out either. They have enough room to grow and touch and kind of bond together. Obviously in the middle, there's this big gap, which is where the strips come in. So you can either cut them a little bit thinner if you want, flatten them out, give them a different shape, however you please. I'm just gonna roll mine right up and put it in the middle. It's really nice to have these extra pieces because if you find that you have too many gaps in kind of like the ring of the bread, you can take these and kind of use them as fillers. I'm gonna use all 4 of these and just place them in the middle. They are kind of huge, but I'm not worried. I know it's gonna look fine when it bakes, so I'm not super picky about that. I'm also gonna like just press them down just a little bit because they do stick out a bit. Now I'm just gonna wash the dough with a beaten egg and some cold water and then sprinkle sesame seeds on top. You can go wild with this. You also don't have to add sesame seeds. If you want, you could actually use poppy seeds. My mom has done that before and it gives the bread some really nice like contrasting colors. So up to you. Now, this again is a time where this recipe differentiates from the norm. Instead of popping it into a completely preheated oven, I'm actually gonna put it into a cold oven and let the bread rise a little bit as the oven preheats. Once it hits 350, I'm gonna let it bake from 30 to 45 minutes. Again, every oven's different, so just keep an eye on it. You kind of want it to have this really nice golden brown color on the outside. As soon as it's done and it comes out of the oven, you can coat it in some butter. And then I'm just gonna put some wax paper on top, followed by a dishcloth, and this is how it's gonna cool. So the bread has completely cooled. I transferred it to a plate, and I'm so excited to try it. This bread is just, it's just amazing. I love this bread because honestly, it didn't really take that long to make. It's a really, really simple recipe ingredient-wise, but it looks like a freaking like Michelangelo painting. It's the bread of all breads. Now, before I get into this taste test, I have to confess something. I would be lying if I said this went as smoothly as I thought it was gonna go. The first batch of dough that I made was a complete disaster. This is like not really working out. I don't know what's happening. I didn't add enough water and then I transferred it to my counter and I started kneading and it was just too dry and beyond the point of repair. I thought I could save it if I added a little bit more water, but it wasn't gonna end well. I set that dough to the side and I restarted and I learned from my mistakes and now I have this like beautiful, beautiful bread in front of me. So I'm really glad that I did that, but nothing goes to waste in my house. So my mom actually took that dough and made her own pogača. She said that it's not her best work. She doesn't really love how it turned out. The dough was obviously a lot harder to work with and stretch and therefore it didn't rise as much. So I'm gonna do a taste test comparison, but first I wanna try this one because I'm so excited. I think like the most fun part about this bread too is that you don't have to cut it. You can literally just pull the pieces apart. Oof, look at that. I'm gonna add a little bit of butter. Exquisite. I usually like to have this bread with a little bit of butter, or if I want something sweet, I'll add a little bit of Nutella on and it just tastes like so good. At the end of the day, it's bread. You can do absolutely anything with it. You can make it into a sandwich, French toast, you can toast it, you can add butter, or one of my favorites, Nutella. Just have fun with it. If you wanted to, you could also experiment with the ingredients themselves. I obviously just added butter in between the layers, but you could definitely add like Nutella or pizza sauce or pesto or like any flavor you wanted to and just make a flavored bread. I think that would taste super delicious and now I really want to try that because why limit yourself? So this is a piece from the bread that my mom made. She did hers with using a slightly different technique, but you can still kind of see like there are layers. It is kind of twisted and turned. Just looking at them, this one looks so much more compact and dense. This one's like really light and airy. You can kind of see it had room to grow and breathe. Even just touching them, this one feels really stale and hard. These were both baked at the same time in the same environment. I didn't heat either of them up in the microwave or anything. So this is their true form. I'm honestly pretty surprised by how drastic the difference is. I obviously knew there would be something that would be a little bit different, but this is actually like, this is a little bit disappointing. Like this bread is kind of a fail. It's not that it's a bad bread. You could save it. I personally would just be really disappointed if you kind of put in all this work and effort and then like you don't have a satisfied bread. So I think the lesson here is that it's okay to start over. It's okay to make mistakes because if it means that the end product is going to be that much better, then why wouldn't you do it? Well guys, that's all from me this week. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next Friday. Bye! As with almost everything,
measuring?
I just want to see how big it is. 70 centimeters.
Can you be quiet for like 5 more minutes? Yeah, just 5. This is a point, again, where this recipe just kind of differentiates. Okay, so on that note, we're gonna get started on the bread. You thought I was gonna say, let's get cooking, but I didn't, so whatever. I don't know if I'm gonna keep that in, we'll see.